Yeah, that stuff in the ABC all the time. Some time ago, Donald Trump said he'd heard hydroxychloroquine might work against this virus. And again, most of the media immediately claimed he must be peddling snake oil. And they even blamed him for the death of a man who ingested a fish tank cleaner with hydroxychloroquine in it. I mean, how stupid can that be? It's crazy stuff. In fact, trials with hydroxychloroquine are now happening all over the world, including right here. Although early results are, yes, true, very mixed. But Trump overnight played with his media haters again to audible gasps from the journalists.
You'd be surprised at how many people are taking it, especially the frontline workers, before you catch it. The frontline workers, many, many are taking it. I happen to be taking it.
Hydroxychloroquine?
I'm taking it, hydroxychloroquine. Right now, yeah. A couple of weeks ago, I started taking it. Because I think it's good. I've heard a lot of good stories. And if it's not good, I'll tell you right, I'm not going to get hurt by it. It's been around for 40 years for malaria, for lupus, for other things. I take it. Frontline workers take it. A lot of doctors take it. Excuse me. A lot of doctors take it. I take it. Yeah, I hope to not be able to take it soon because, you know, I hope they come up with some answer. But I think people should be allowed to.
Trump is taking this drug as well as zinc under medical supervision, but clearly was playing with the journalists by telling them.
I was just waiting to see your eyes light up when I said this.
And they did, and off the media went here, there and everywhere, with The Independent, for instance, sneering that Trump takes hydroxychloroquine every day because what does scientists know anyway? And CNN experts, then all trashed him.
Shouldn't be taking it. I mean, you know, his own FDA has said that this is still something under investigation. It should not be taken outside of a clinical trial. Taken out of only hospitalized patients should be getting it. I mean, what he said about the fact that it's been used for malaria prophylaxis for decades is true. What we have found more recently is in people who already have COVID, already have this disease, that there are some real concerns, you know, and concerns about impact on the heart, possibly causing these heart arrhythmias.
But Trump does not already have the disease, is using it in the way it's been trialled in Australia to prevent you getting it in the first place. The ABC in Melbourne also asked Nobel Prize winner Peter Doherty about it. He's not a Trump lover at all, so he seemed a little bit torn in criticising him.
This morning, the US President Donald Trump has said that he is regularly taking hydroxychloroquine as well as zinc, and he finds that's working for him. Your reflection on that?
Yeah, zinc's probably not a bad idea. I personally wouldn't take hydroxychloroquine. It's kind of toxic, but there was a bit of evidence that it might be beneficial. A lot of other evidence suggests it might be dangerous, but there are still trials going on. We're not really quite sure about it, I think.
And the funny thing there is that the Peter Doherty Institute, named after this very same Peter Doherty, is itself giving exactly this same drug, hydroxychloroquine, in a trial in patients with coronavirus in more than 70 hospitals, it says, across Australia and 11 hospitals in New Zealand. How about that? Maybe Trump's not so mad after all. Joining me is Gerard Henderson, columnist for The Australian, head of the Sydney Institute, and author of the Media Watchdog blog. Gerard, what was really interesting there is Trump deliberately saying something he knew would get the media attacking him. It's like he knows that the more they do that, the better it is for him.
Well, I think the president's doing today or yesterday in the United States what he's done a lot. He's playing to his base. He realises that the media isn't popular. If you criticise the media, you'll get a reaction from the media because they're oh so sensitive to criticism. And then when you get to the reaction from the media, that's what you want, and you appeal to your base. Look, I'm no medical expert. I've no idea whether he should take this drug on the advice of his doctor or not. He obviously thinks he should. Presumably his doctor thinks he should. Some people think he shouldn't. I mean, it's an issue between him and his doctor if he's taking medically prescribed drugs. But the media just goes mad. If you go to the earlier part of the clip you showed, you've got Malcolm Farr. As I recall, he's been a journalist all his life. I'm not sure he's done anything else apart from journalism. Correct me if I'm wrong. But you've got Malcolm Farr sitting back on the insider's couch calling the President of the United States effectively an idiot because he involves himself in idiocy. Now, I would say to Mr. Farr, he must have a fairly short vocabulary, because you should be able to work out better words to say that. If you don't like the president, there are reasonable criticisms you can make. Many people do, but going around calling people idiots doesn't do much at all. It just shows a very low level of debate, which is taking place in large parts of Australian journalism, but also in the United States, where people just fire off when the president fires up, and in a sense it's sort of fun watching it, but I don't think it's going to resolve the issue one way or the other. But at least he's not
in the late tonight. Then Gerard, and write letters to all the people I've called idiot. I've called idiot. I'm trying to think, have I done it this week? You're such a well-mannered person. You're shaming.
I was well brought up, you see. Yeah.
You were well brought up. But Gerard, this media, the media's reflexive hatred of Donald Trump. I mean, it's just insane. And I'm just wondering what's driving it.
Well, I think it's it's two things. I mean, certainly it's hatred, but the hatred is driven by the fact that against all the predictions of nearly all the media, he won. Now, if Trump had lost and was making these comments as a loser, no one would take much notice. But he's resented because he won. And the left, which dominates the American media, it doesn't control all of it, but it dominates most of it, deeply resents the fact that he won. So what they're looking for is any possible mistake or perceived mistake or stumble or perceived stumble that the president makes. They jump on it because, in a sense, it validates their position that he shouldn't be president at any rate. But the point is that a majority of people in a majority of states, which is the crucial issue, who holds the electoral majority in the Electoral College, they chose President Trump, and come November, I'm no prophet, but they may do it again. And this, you can see how the media hate it, but so do people like Ms. Pelosi and his political opponents. They absolutely hate him. Now, I'm not aware of any US president that I can recall in my lifetime who was hated the way Donald Trump is. I'm not aware of it.
Ronald Reagan copped absolute rubbish, as did George W. Bush, but I thought that was, particularly against Bush, was insane, but this is another level altogether. And I wonder, just going on your point, by the way, I've just made a mental note, that was the closest to an election prediction I've ever heard Gerard Henderson offer, because you normally refuse to do that. Yeah. I'm writing that down. On your point, there was an emphasis there, Gerard. I didn't miss it. The ABC, about the fury of the media for Trump making idiots of them. Another example, the ABC sent its gun reporter, Sarah Ferguson, around the world at God knows what expense to taxpayers to do a 3-part TV series on the theory, although it was presented more as an assumption, that Donald Trump colluded with Russia to steal the election. There was some kind of Russian agent or a puppet of the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. Here's Sarah Ferguson.
Tonight, we begin our special 3-part investigation into the story of the century, the election of US President Donald Trump and his ties to Russia. The Kremlin's puppet master now has America dancing to his discordant tune. He couldn't have planned it better.
Now, Ferguson's star witness for this stitch-up for the prosecution was a former CIA boss and an official in Barack Obama's government administration, James Clapper. Here he is.
The Russians are famous for interfering in elections, theirs and other people's. And then when candidate Trump became very viable, particularly when he became the Republican nominee, then they were attracted to him because they thought he would be much better for them. Businessman, negotiator, deal maker, someone who had been exposed to Russia.
Would Russian intelligence look at Trump's business career as a vulnerability that they could exploit?
Well, absolutely. That's kind of standard tradecraft, goes back to the Soviet era.
You saw your nation convulsed by division caused by the Watergate scandal. How does this compare?
Oh, I think what's going on now makes that pale. That was purely a domestic thing. We didn't have the involvement of a foreign adversary, our prime foreign adversary, Russia, in that. And so to me, it's much more worrisome.
So these are dangerous times.
They are.
Gerard, that three-part series starring Sarah Ferguson and James Clapper, how does that look now with the passage of time?
Well, the music still works. I think the dramatic music that's lasted. But Sarah Ferguson's predictions and comments haven't lasted. Look, this was presented by the ABC, which was done at great expense to the Australian taxpayer. She spent a lot of time overseas. She visited a number of capital cities and she spoke to a lot of people. The star performer was James Clapper. He was right at the start of the three-part series. He was on at the end of the three-part series and in between. And obviously he saw this Australian journalist come in and thought, here's a sucker. Because he told Miss Ferguson what she wanted to hear. And like so many journalists today, not all of them, she believed what she wanted to believe. She regarded his testimony as compelling. So what he told her about the Russian intervention and Putin dominating the United States, she believed because she wanted to believe it. But when, as you know, when Mr. Clapper went on oath, unlike when you're talking to Australian journalists or American journalists, you're not on oath. When you're talking in sections of the US Congress, you are. And when Mr. Clapper went on oath, he told the truth. And the truth was he had no evidence for anything he said. Nothing.
I'll just read that out, what he actually told them. He said, I never saw any direct empirical evidence that the Trump campaign or someone in it was plotting or conspiring with the Russians to meddle with the election. And in fact, that was what the 2-year-long, nearly, Mueller inquiry also found. So
came to the same conclusion.
Came to the same conclusion. The ABC to this day has not adequately, in my view, and I think yours, said, listen, we were wrong. You shouldn't trust us when it comes to Donald Trump, I tell you that much. Gerard Henderson, thank you so much. And people who want more on Gerard should, on his reflections on this, should read his Media Watchdog blog from last Friday. Gerard, that was a terrific piece you wrote. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And one last thing about Chinese bullying. Boy, did I once get a taste of it. 20 years ago, a bit more actually. And Alexander Downer reminded me of that when we were filming before, because he helped save me. I was a foreign correspondent based in Hong Kong, and I'd heard that China had captured a ship, the Petro Ranger, which had an Australian captain, and towed it into a port in Hainan Island, which Hainan's part of China. And I flew over to go see for myself, and I hired a boat to talk to the captain, to interview him. But on the second trip, the Chinese arrested me. They saw me, they arrested me, bullets fired over my head. Boy, that makes you stop. While I was arrested, they had me for hours in the clink. One soldier would pretend to fire an imaginary rifle at me and do this. All I'd done was interview an Australian, okay? But that wasn't all. China said officially it had rescued this ship from pirates, which seems true in a way. But were they pirates or business partners? Because it turns out when China finally did release the Petro Ranger, it was missing half its cargo of fuel. China had kept it, and it sold it, and it let the pirates go after beating them up. Very good business arrangement. In fact, one of the security officials finally got around to interrogating me and demanding I sign a self-criticism note, a souvenir T-shirt on from Thailand, from Pattaya, which if you've ever been there, and I did to track down Australians in deep trouble, Pattaya is a real sex and sin city, not the place we expect to find a Chinese law enforcement official. Strangest insight I've ever had into China and everything it's done since does not surprise me at all.